Dr. Chris Webster's instincts were spot on.
With the killer mushroom cook. Dr. Chris Webster says...
Dr. Chris Webster was the
Chris
first...
Webster treated Erin Patterson after that fatal mushroom lunch.
Chris Webster has just clocked on for a 24-hour shift.
He's become the man of the moment in the trial of Erin Patterson. Chris Webster, the doctor who was on call when the guest of the deadly lunch went to Leongatha Hospital. He said a lot on the stand, but he has said a lot more since. I'm Brooke Grebert-Craig, and this is The Mushroom Cook. Hi Laura, nice to have you back in Melbourne with me.
Yes, it's great to be back home. It's crazy to think that for 3 months we were effectively living in Morwell. And it's actually been brought to my attention that we've maybe been saying it wrong this whole time. I've heard that the locals call it Morwell. So less Morwell, more Morwell. The more you know.
If only I had known that 11 weeks ago.
It would have been helpful.
So as a court reporter, how are you feeling after covering the trial?
Yeah, we actually haven't seen each other for a few days. Obviously, we were together on Monday, and then after the verdict came down and we finished work that night, we both went our separate ways. But it's been a big few days, hasn't it?
Yes, I think it's safe to say that we were both kind of on an adrenaline rush for a couple of days, but now that's kind of calming down.
Yeah, it is. I actually think the adrenaline only wore off for me yesterday. There's been a lot of work we've all been doing after the verdict, a lot of stories we've been writing, and a lot of things that have come out since the day we found out that Erin was a murderer. And at the centre of one of those stories was the straight-shooting Dr. Webster. And you actually spoke to him nearly a month ago, isn't that right, Brooke?
Yes, that's right. So I did a phone interview with Dr. Webster on a Saturday morning on June 14. So this was 3 weeks before we received a verdict. And obviously we couldn't publish the story at the time. This was me really preparing for after we got a verdict. And, you know, at this point in time, we didn't really know when the trial would actually wrap up. I've never spoken to Dr. Webster before, so I really didn't know how much he would say. But as I discovered during the interview, he was really quite candid with the words that he used. And we published in the Herald Sun the day after the verdict, so on the Tuesday. And from there, Dr. Webster was really inundated with media requests from across the country. I know he did TV interviews, he did print stories, he also did radio interviews, and to his credit, he did them all. But I do believe that he was really the most candid with me.
And you were telling me earlier that you actually touched base with him today.
Yes, I did. And just to break the fourth wall with our listeners, Dr. Webster gave permission for us to use the audio grabs from that phone interview that I did with him 3 weeks ago. So in this podcast episode, we will throw to those throughout. The interview did go for more than 1 hour, so I will flag we can't include all of it. And as I mentioned before, this was a phone interview, so the audio may not be the best, but we've cleaned it up as best we can.
But there's also been a development.
That's right. Unfortunately, Dr. Webster was telling me that members of the public have actually reported him to APRA, which is the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. And apparently they reported him for the language that he used during the interview that he did with me. So clearly members of the public are not happy with that. And to be honest with you, I think it's quite unfair. Here we have a doctor who has been a witness in such a high-profile murder trial and hasn't really had the opportunity to speak about his experience. And personally, I think just because he swears, it doesn't make him any less of a doctor who is fit to do his profession.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But as we do take our listeners through the interview you did with him, Brooke, we will probably have to flag that our bleeper will be getting a workout.
Yes, that's right.
So let's start from the top. To take our listeners back to the timeline, Dr. Webster first enters the frame when Heather and Ian arrive at Leongatha Hospital the day after the lunch. He then attended to Erin when she rocked up at the hospital the following day.
Here's what he said.
The thing about Erin Patterson arriving is that I was, like most people in the department at that time that Erin arrived, was pretty frantically rushing around getting the treatment, the best treatment that we had available to us, organised for Ian and Heather.
Yeah.
And when you have got a lot of things that a lot of people need to be doing, what you do as a doctor often becomes a sort of a delegation kind of. You're not necessarily, I could put a cannula in, but the nurses are putting the cannula in, so you kind of, it's like a footy coach, I suppose. You're sort of keeping an eye on what everyone's doing and making sure it's all flowing in the right direction. So my hands were not busy doing something, and the doorbell, which is actually the doorbell more accurately, sort of it's like a nurse call button. When the patient's lying in the hospital bed and they press that button to call the nurse. Well, that's pretty similar to how it keeps getting called a doorbell in the description of the court trial, but it's really a nurse call bell, so it'll continue ringing until someone goes and stops it. And it's hard enough to concentrate with all the alarms and beeps and bells and whistles in urgent care. So I went to find out who was responsible for pressing the doorbell. And when the person, the woman that was sitting there, said the reason that she was there is I've got gastro. The first thing I said after that was just to make sure, it was like a reflex, I suppose, what's your name? And she said, Erin Patterson. And so I didn't recognise her. I didn't know who the woman was. And when she said the name Erin Patterson, having just had a pretty shocking phone call from Dr. Beth about death cap mushrooms, to have her sitting there, I was like, oh, okay, better get you into the department, which, I mean, I sort of bypassed some protocols. Normally a stable patient that's sitting in the waiting area comfortably breathing and clearly conscious and alert and not distressed. Normally a patient like that might wait quite a while before being brought in to the department, and they would be assessed by a triage nurse first. I bypassed all that and just brought it straight in.
He went on to say,
at the point that she said Erin Patterson, I was like, okay, good. We've got the fifth member of the meal here. We can now concentrate on giving all the members of the luncheon the right treatment. But that thought was fairly short-lived when I said to her, the concern about death cap mushrooms, where did you get the mushrooms? When she said Woolworths, as opposed to, I pick my own mushrooms. I always pick my own mushrooms. If she had said that, it would have been a very different sort of mindset for me, because there would have been that sort of instant kind of assumption that it was all a tragic accident. But she, like I said in court, she gave that single word answer.
and in words that will stick with me for a long time, he went on to tell me.
So once she said that answer, my thoughts were, holy shit, you fucking did it. You crazy bitch, you poisoned them all.
So as our listeners can hear, Dr. Webster was quite candid and didn't really hold back at all. He went on to say that moment was a turning point for him.
Everything for me changed at that moment. That's from that moment, you're okay. So you're sociopathic nutbag, and you've done this, and everything I do from this point is obviously going to be, everything I had done to that point, everything I was going to do. I knew from that moment that she said Woolworths that everything would be very closely scrutinised under the microscope in the aftermath, because from that moment I knew, well, this is going to be a trial, this is going to be charges, this is going to be this is going to be a circus.
So as we know from the trial, Erin left hospital after only 5 minutes of being there. Dr. Webster then made that crucial call to 000. The jury heard that Dr. Webster made that call so police could perform a welfare check on Erin. But it's pretty clear that by this stage, he also had his suspicions. Now, Brooke, our listeners actually heard one of our colleagues voice that call in one of our previous podcast episodes. But now we can finally play you the actual audio of that call after it was released by the Supreme Court.
This is Dr. Chris Webster calling from Leongatha Hospital, and I have a concern regarding a patient that presented here earlier but has left the building and is potentially exposed to a fatal toxin from mushroom poisoning, and I've tried several times to get hold of her on her mobile phone.
So, before I get all that information in, what address do you need the police to attend, Dr. Chris?
Well, should I give the hospital address or the address of the patient?
If you know where they are, their address.
I have the address of the patient.
Their conversation continued.
What's her name?
So the last name is Patterson, Patterson.
First name?
Erin, Erin.
Do you have a date of birth?
30th of September, 1974.
When did she present at hospital?
At 8:05.
Today?
Yeah.
Mushroom poisoning, you said?
Yeah, so there were 5 people that ate a meal on Saturday, and 2 of them are in intensive care at Dandenong Hospital. 2 have just been transferred from Leongatha Hospital to Dandenong Hospital, and Erin presented this morning with symptoms of poisoning.
So this recording was one of dozens of exhibits released to the media on the day of the verdict. It was actually almost overwhelming. You and I were outside court working on our laptops, and then all of a sudden I got this email and there was a link to, again, dozens of exhibits. So our listeners would have remembered us describing the exhibits on the podcast. For example, the CCTV footage of Erin at the BP in Caldermead, and the photos of the leftovers of the beef Wellington. So it's been really nice to finally be able to publish these exhibits for people to look and to listen themselves.
Yes, I think people being able to actually get the visual for themselves is really important in the storytelling of the case. So as we know, Erin came back to the hospital after more than 1 hour and Dr. Webster saw her again. Here's what he said about that interaction.
So having perused her file in preparation for the 000 call, knowing that she had children, I asked about the children and whether they had eaten any leftover. So that information was provided as a result of direct questioning. It wasn't volunteered or offered up by Erin.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I thought, f***ing hell, the kids have eaten poisonous mushrooms as well. So... and that's why I put the efforts into ensuring that the children were medically assessed as well.
He then went on to say,
He was talking to her about death trap mushrooms, and she wasn't freaking out about the safety of her children. My thought, looking in her eyes, you're I don't know what planet you're on. It's not Earth. In other words, I thought she was disturbed.
and as you can hear, once again, he is quite candid.
But basically I thought, oh shit, you did it, and you're crazy, and this is going to be huge.
And if I remember correctly, Brooke, Dr. Webster actually said that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be a witness in a high-profile murder trial, but he said it didn't come without regrets. Is that right?
Yes, so Dr. Webster treated Ian and Heather, and he told me that he wished that he probed Heather more when she was in hospital. Here's what he said.
Heather said to me, at one stage I said, not much of a birthday celebration. So I was sort of fishing, a bit like a barrister, I suppose. I was not much of a birthday celebration. And Heather just sort of, her eyes went downcast and she sort of shook her head a little bit and said, it wasn't a birthday celebration. And she didn't elaborate, and I will never forgive myself for not asking further questions because I realised that I had hit upon something.
During our interview, Dr. Webster said some incredibly kind words about the lunch guests, but in particular about Heather.
I think what's been lost a bit in the trial is just how humble and decent these people are that were the victims. And a lot of people in urgent care are quite aggressive, and hostile even when you're trying to help them as a doctor. So for Heather to be pushed into the back of an ambulance and just before the door closed, for her to say to me, thank you, Dr. Webster, for all your care. The look on her face, the sincerity of her gratitude and the door sort of closing on her a bit like the final scene in The Godfather. That'll haunt me. That'll haunt me forever.
Another part of the interview I remember finding interesting was that Dr. Webster said Erin greased him off when he gave evidence.
Yes, you know what? This didn't actually surprise me. I think when you and I were both in the court observing Erin, we could see that she most of the time had a really stern look on her face. Here's what Dr. Webster said about that.
I was so nervous about giving my evidence, and I looked over and these sort of searing hot daggers shot out of her eyes and went straight into my brain. But she didn't just grease me off. She greased off my wife. She greased off the Mitchell who drove Georgia and me to court that day. So, we all sort of debriefed in the car ride on the way home. Did you look at her at any stage? I looked up. She gave me the stinkiest stink eye you could, so it was all a lot of anger and hostility in her look when she was, incarcerated and sitting in the accused dock of a triple murder trial. So a different flavour, but the same level of severe sort of disturbance in normal sort of human behaviour and personality.
As our listeners will know, ultimately the prosecution did not provide a motive to the jury. But since the verdicts, everyone has been drawing their own conclusions.
Yes, you and I have had many discussions, just like I have had with Dows, as we mentioned on yesterday's episode. But Dr. Webster also drew his own conclusions as to why he thinks that Erin murdered her lunch guests.
I think that the reason she did something so extreme is because she couldn't see any other way to have life the way she wanted it without these people being out of the picture.
He continued.
I think once she got onto the train track that led to the destination, there was no ability for her to get off it, short of someone coming up and just slapping her across the face and saying, break out of it, or maybe having some electroconvulsive therapy or something. She's obviously an intelligent, capable individual that, and I would say that the planning and the strategizing and foraging and chopping things up and all of that probably gave her a sense of calm. It probably acted a bit like a antidepressant or a bit like Valium or something, that each time she did something that brought her closer to this life that was free of these people that were so bad to her.
And with Dr. Webster in the public eye this week, we just want to wish him well. And Dr. Webster, if you're listening, thank you so much for talking to me all those weeks ago.
Well said, Brooke. And with that, we're off for today, but we'll be back tomorrow for another episode.
Stay tuned.